At the Sports History Network, we're proud to introduce you to a new sponsor for our podcasts. It's Home Field Apparel, your premium collegiate apparel brand right out of Indianapolis. They've got incredibly comfortable t-shirts, plus they're officially licensed with vintage college designs. They have over 150 plus colleges available now and always adding more. Homefield digs through the archives and history of your school to find unique logos, mascots, and moments to make thoughtful designs for your school. When you shop today, new customers can get a 15% discount off their first purchase using the promo code SPORTSHISTORY at checkout. You can learn more at homefieldapparel.com.
Get ready to learn about all the great gridiron exploits and those of the wrestling ring as well, and more on the life of Bronko Nagurski from the head of NFL Films Library and author Chris Willis in his brand new book, Bronko, the legendary story of the NFL's greatest two-way fullback. Chris is up in just a second to tell us all about it.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with PigskinDispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And we have a great interview lined up today. We're going to talk to one of our friends, Chris Willis, who is the head of the NFL Films Library and an author of multiple books. We've had him on here a bunch of times here on the program, talking about some of his other books, you know, the book on Joe Carr, book on Red Grange. He's helped us out with our football numbers before. And he's got a new book out that we're going to talk about. And I'll let him introduce it to you here in just a moment as we bring in Chris Willis. Welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on.
Now, Chris, this is, we were talking a little bit before we came on. This is an extremely busy time of the year for anybody involved in football, but for you particularly, this is, you've got a bunch of things going on. And I don't know if you wanted to say some of those on air to give them a little bit of pub or.
Sure. You know, I mean, if you're a football fan, like I said, you're licking your chops now. You know, college football started this weekend, and like I said, we've been working on Hard Knocks. We got two more shows with Hard Knocks. You know,
another outstanding season. You guys hit it out of the park again.
Sure. And then the kickoff games. Preseason is wrapping up now. Then we got the kickoff game on September 8th, and then the full weekend of football coming up. So yeah, so if you're a football fan, it's like I said, I always say it's good busy. It's not bad busy. It's all good busy. To be involved. So, but now we're getting close to real games, especially in the NFL.
And just when you thought Chris was busy with all that he just mentioned, he's also got a book that just came out. And Chris, if you could give us the title of the book and where folks can get it from, we'll talk about it again later in the program as well. Sure.
Yeah, it's a biography. It's a book on Bronko Nagurski, the Bears Hall of Fame fullback. So it's called Bronko, the legendary story of the NFL's greatest two-way fullback. And it just was out in the middle of July. So it's starting to make its rounds. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and then our publisher is Rowan and Littlefield. So if you go on ROWMAN.com, you can get you can pick it up there too. So, but it's just released the last month or so.
So yeah, I'm sure your email inbox and telephones are ringing and everything's extremely busy for you this time of year. So we really appreciate you coming on and spending a few moments with us to talk about this book.
Sure. No, thank you.
As one thing I really enjoy about your books, and those of the listeners that have read Chris's work, is how he goes into the detail and the roots of the subjects that he's talking about. And he does the same in this book, in the Bronko book. And maybe you could just give us a little bit of background on where Bronko came from. I guess, first of all, let's start off what his proper name is, his God-given name is.
Yeah, he was He's actually born in Canada, just over the Canadian border, in Ontario. So Bronislaw Nagurski was his full name. But that name was very difficult to pronounce, as he was growing up. The family early on, around, I think he was around 5-6 years old, he moved from Ontario to International Falls. His father moved the family to International Falls. And so the kids, started playing with him, but they had a hard time pronounce his name. And so Bronko was a logical sort of Ukrainian nickname that they gave him. And, and it actually, he kept it for the rest of his life. He pretty much went by Bronko, like I said, the rest of his life. And he sort of stayed in International Falls, even when he became, a great player with the Bears. He became a world championship wrestler too, in the 30s. He always came back to International Falls, and he sort of lived pretty much his entire life there until he passed away in 1990 in that area. So that's kind of where he was from. Sort of northern Minnesota, up there, near the Canadian border, so which was like a sort of tough lifestyle, they have like what I think Bronco used to say, a quote, something like they had, 8 months of winter and 3 months of bad snow or bad sledding, for the rest of the year. So he loved it up there. He loved the lake, and he loved being a part of that area. And that's sort of, and he got that reputation of being like a Paul Bunyan-esque, player or personality because of where he was from in International Falls and stuff. So that's where he sort of got his persona.
Well, it's interesting you said the Paul Bunyan thing, because there's at least one story I've heard about, and I think I've even said it on one of my programs that I sit there and I scratch my head. It's a little bit hard to believe. I'm sure there's other ones too about him, because he almost is personified as Paul Bunyan, at least in this one story, of how he and his coach at Minnesota, Doc Spears, met. Now, you say it a much different way, which I think sounds more like that's probably the truth. But have you heard some of these tales?
Yeah. I mean, the tale of Spears sort of driving through that area and seeing Bronco plowing a farm field with no horse, and then asking for directions, and he lifts the plow. But that was definitely a story. I wrote about that in the book, because several interviews, Nagurski says, yeah, that was sort of made up, and it was sort of a good sort of a banquet story. He would go with it a little bit and get the chuckle and stuff. So, but definitely, like I said, part of that sort of Paul Bunyan-esque sort of persona that he got the reputation of.
Yeah, that was the only thing that was missing from that story, was the giant blue ox in the background.
Sure.
I think so. But let's talk a little bit more about him at International Falls growing up from the book, because I think it really establishes who Bronco is. And, the family sort of goes through some turmoil and some life-changing moments when he's a child in International Falls. Maybe you could describe a little bit about that. Yeah,
obviously this is early 1900s, so they're especially in that area, they had some fires. Like his father, started out working in the mills. There's some paper mills and some mills there in the area, and they had some fires, and so he had to kind of adjust. And then when they moved to International Falls, he sort of started his own business. He had a sort of like a grocery store there that became had housing and stuff like that. So it was a little bit of a struggle. He was never homeless, but he like I said, but that's all he knew. He learned hard work from his dad. At the store, there's several quotes from Nagurski that I found. It's like he would go to school and then he'd come back and work at the store. He'd make deliveries in the family wagon, to whoever needs it, whether it was food or grain, sugar or whatever, that they had, and things like that. So it was definitely, a country-esque sort of lifestyle that sort of, that they just made the best of what they did. He had a brother and two other sisters, that he helped take care of too, so he learned, and like I said, I think the most important thing he learned sort of how to be a hard worker, and especially the times on the farm and in the mills and things like that. He even did some of that, like he built his body up to be, he was 6'2", 235 pounds, like just this chiseled, sort of Greek god, and that's how, as an athlete and stuff. So all that came from this sort of hardworking background with his family.
Okay. Yeah, I got that. I mean, if there's an underlying theme to the whole book, it's, the Nagurski family and Bronko emulating that for his whole life. That, like you said, that hard work and putting in all the effort to get the job done and doing a little bit more. And it shows in his football prowess and wrestling as well, as you define in the book. It's some great examples of that. So some things to look forward to for the listeners that when they pick up the book to read this. Now, you have him playing, high school a little bit in International Falls, and then his senior season of high school, he makes a little bit of a change to who he's playing for.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those sort of era things, those sort of vagabond type of things. Like there weren't quite as many hardcore rules, although the Minneapolis high school athletics was there. So, but International Falls was definitely a super small town, so they didn't have a lot of boys playing on the team, so they weren't that competitive. They actually didn't really win a football game when Bronko was there for his couple of years, and then before his senior year, there was a team. Most of the teams were like, an hour away because they're so spread out. It was Bemidji was a very good football team. The year before, Bronco's junior year, I think they beat International Falls like 48-0. Although they could see that Bronko might have been the best player on the field, he just didn't have anything surrounding him, so they sort of kind of recruited. It was like, hey, if you come to play for us, you could play on the football team and the basketball team, and you'll get, a little more publicity, and you might be able to go play in college. The coach there, kind of promised him that, hey, if you want to go play in college, I might be able to get you into college. So he asked his parents, and so since his parents weren't going to, have to pay for anything, he would stay there. They were going to get him a job, and he was actually going to live in the janitor's room. There was going to be a cot for him in the janitor's room. So he goes down there, but International Falls athletic director, head coach, really disliked it. So they actually asked the athletic association to look into this, and it turned out like because he was a transfer, he would actually have to sit out a semester. He did not live in Bemidji, so it turns out that his senior year he still went because he said they still need him for basketball, but all he did was practice, and he did not play in the games. So he did actually not play in any varsity games during his senior year. Then he ended up playing the basketball season, and he graduated from Bemidji, not International Falls High School. So he spent 1 year there, and then he sort of graduated, and then he came back to International Falls.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting story, but he didn't play. But like you said, he practiced, and you pointed out in your story that some of the things that the benefits he got of practicing with a bigger school that was a little bit more established, a coach was had a little bit more wherewithal, probably a little bit better program, that he learned a lot of things that he probably wouldn't have learned if he stayed at the International Falls team. Is that a true statement?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, Bemidji was one of the better program, especially in that area in the state of Minnesota. So he had one quote that I found in one of his interviews. Like he mentioned, at that point I thought I could play in college because I was just as good as some of the players, or even better than the players that were on the team. I just didn't get to play, in the games. And so they gave him confidence that, hey, if I do go, to college, and of course he went to University of Minnesota, he thought he could be competitive and play because of the fall that he spent, practicing against a very good team that had some pretty quality players.
Yeah. So he stayed somewhat local, goes to the University of Minnesota, plays for Doc Spears, as we alluded to earlier. And by the way, I think you did a magnificent job. I learned a lot about Doc Spears because just like you did with Bronco, you went back and told the backstory of Doc Spears and where he grew up and everything. And I'll let the listeners get a copy of the book and do that. We won't spoil it, but it's a fantastic biography on Doc Spears too. I just wanted to point out.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting guy. You played a little pro football too. With the Canton Bull, like he was a very good pro player before the NFL got established. So, yeah. So that was So there's a lot of his backstory, and then obviously coached Bronco, at the University of Minnesota.
Yeah, it's at Minnesota. It's really interesting. I didn't realize that this was of issue until you pointed out in the book. It's something I learned from the book that he was the title you have being a two-way player at fullback. Well, his problem, or not a problem, I guess it's a good problem to have, is he was so good at a couple different positions on offense in college that Doc Spears had a decision to make. And maybe if you could chat a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, he was. I mean, as big as he was, you think, oh, he's going to be a line, but he was so athletic, and he was so. Not only was he big and strong, but he was so athletic and so gifted. Catching the ball, running the ball. Like he started out really as an end, in his early varsity career, and then he played tackle, and then he was moved to fullback. So he could play a variety of positions. Although he was 6'2", 225 maybe at the time. He was very athletic and very gifted, with the way he could run. He was just not a big lumbering guy. So Doc had a little bit, he pretty much up to, I think his sophomore year, Broncos, like he had Herb Josting there, who was a very good fullback who did play in the NFL. So he was a senior. So he actually got a lot of the playing time early, and that's why he needed to find a different position. Played him played him at tackle. But once Josting left, Bronco was the logical choice to play fullback, and he didn't look back from there. He was one of the best fullbacks in the country, and then obviously in the NFL. So, but very versatile. Bronco could have played tackle or end in the NFL too, and probably would have been all pro.
Yeah, it's extremely something, like I said, is something I wasn't aware of in college. That he excelled at both. So the other thing I thought was really interesting, that sort of along that same line, is his senior year. There's maybe you could just talk about, he played one of those positions a little bit more than the other, and what happened with the All-American honors.
Yeah, I mean, his senior year, he's pretty much a starting fullback. But because the most important games were the conference games, it was the West Conference, but it was what would be the Big Ten. So early on, Doc had a little bit of some injuries and some inexperience on the line. So he actually played Bronco in some of those non-conference games at tackle, but not a lot. He did not play tackle very much. But once the conference game started, he back at fullback. He played fullback, and was great at fullback. And so there were most of the newspapers and the media outlets at the time put Bronco at fullback as an all-American, but there were a few, and I believe New York Sun was the big one, that actually put him at tackle. So he actually, although he did not play very much tackle during the season, but they were like, he was so good, let's name him at All-American as tackle. So he actually was named for two different positions in one season. So very unique even at that time.
Yeah, that's really unique, and that just tells you the talent level that the man had at both positions to be that well respected across the country. So very interesting indeed. Okay, so what happened? He plays in his final game, and there's sort of a meeting of different things in his life. It's sort of a pinnacle moment, that the final game, I believe it was against Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken, when he played at Minnesota. And he had, some things going on. Maybe if you could just talk about that a bit.
You're talking about playing wise, or
his I believe that was the only game his parents saw, or the first game his parents.
Well, that was the game before.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, his senior year, he played. Minnesota played Michigan, and his parents had never seen him play, and it was. So they came down from International Falls, their whole family, and they saw him play against Michigan. He ended up losing, a tough game. So Bronco wasn't in great mood. But because and also the whole town, actually, it wasn't just a family. It was like, I think well over 200 people from International Falls came down to see this game because it was going to be his last home game. And so they had a banquet at the local hotel there. And one of his sisters brought a friend, who was actually 3 years younger than her, but they were pretty good friends. It turned out to be Eileen Kane, who ends up being the woman who marries Bronko Nagurski. So that's where they kind of first meet, and Bronko, is infatuated with her, and then obviously, over the next 5 or 6 years, they act across paths because of the International Falls, and they end up getting married. So, that was a very fun weekend for him, even though he lost. And then the following week against Wisconsin, like you mentioned, that was his last game, and he wasn't going to lose that game. And so he went out and he actually single-handedly helped defeat the Badgers, and he went out sort of as a winner in his last game. So, but that sort of homecoming sort of family thing, it definitely at the University of Minnesota was a huge weekend for him.
Yeah, that's a great story. The irony of the sour defeat, and it sounded like he took it hard, but then seeing his family and friends there to support him, and then meeting his future wife. That's a spectacular ending to what started off not so good for him earlier in the day. So tremendous. So how did what happened with Bronko after he graduated from Minnesota?
He didn't actually graduate. So he was still taking classes, but at the end of his senior season, he actually was invited to play in a prestigious All-Star game that was just getting started on the West Coast. It's the old East-West Shrine game that I believe is still around. It's bounced around on the West Coast, but it's mainly played in San Francisco. Well, at the time, this was starting to become one of the better sort of marquee games, especially football games, so they invited seniors to play, and he made the Eastern team to play in that game, and then Bob Tanner was another teammate of his that also played in that game. So this is where he sort of gets the itch to play pro ball. He's like, okay, I think I can compete. I think I can play. So the East team actually practices for 2 or 3 days in Chicago first before they go out to San Francisco. At this time, this is January or end of December 1929. Well, of course, this is George Halas territory. So Halas, likes that this team's practicing there. So he gets the inside scoop. He goes and sees the team practice, and obviously he's very infatuated with Bronko and his running style and his, physicality. And he's like, so he talks to him, say, hey, if you're willing to play, like when you get back from the All-Star game, let's talk, and, we'll talk salary, or, because I want you for the Bears. So, Bronco's intrigued, like, okay, I think there's a few other teams that are, riding to him, but so he goes out and plays in San Francisco, and he turns out to be a really good game for him. He's probably the best player in the field, even with Dutch Clark. Dutch Clark also played on that same game. So then when he comes back, obviously, Halas makes the big push, and, Nagurski, likes what he sees, and he ends up signing with the Bears.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned Dutch Clark, of course. Those, if you look on Amazon and your publisher, you have a book out on Dutch Clark as well that you wrote a few years back. So just wanted to mention that, which is also very interesting. Okay, so he eventually signs on with Halas and plays in a couple really interesting games during his career. And maybe if you could just highlight a couple of those that I know we've talked about, but they're so interesting. He's an integral part of them.
Yeah, I mean, he's right at that pivotal point where, the NFL, although it's the Depression, in 1930s, his rookie year, the NFL is starting to grow. They're starting to think, we need to be in the big cities, and we need to be thinking as a business. So he comes along at the right time where the NFL is sort of on the rise, and some of these games are very important, and even now, 95 years late, like these are some of the most important games in NFL history. The first one mainly is 1932, where the Bears and the Spartans tie. The Port Spartans are now the Detroit Lions, but they were a small town team in Ohio at the time in 32. So they tied for the title. or they tie for first place, but there's no championship game in the NFL. It's a team with the best record. So they decide to play a playoff game, but then there's a snowstorm in Chicago the week of the game. And it's just a massive snowstorm. So they move the game indoors to Chicago Stadium, but it's a small field. So Bronco plays. He actually throws the only touchdown. He throws a touchdown pass to Red Grange for the only touchdown, and the Bears win 9-0. But it opens the eyes of the NFL. Like, hey, we need to have hash marks. We need to throw from anywhere behind the line of scrimmage, which you had to be 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. It was a rule at the time. College football made these rules, so they're like, no, let's separate from college football. So Bronco was part of that game, and that sort of separate. And then they split the NFL into two divisions and created an NFL championship game, kind of like the World Series with the American and National League in 1933. So the Bears win the Western Division that first championship season, and they play the Giants in Wrigley Field. And Bronco has another great game. He throws 2 jump pass touchdowns, including the game winner in the last couple of minutes, and they win 23-21. So like I said, and then the next year in 1934, they win the division again. They play in New York, and this is the famous sneaker game. He actually plays really well, but the Giants put the sneakers on in the second half, and they actually win. So there's 3 consecutive years he plays in, like you said, 3 of the most important games in NFL history: the indoor game, the first NFL championship game, and then the sneaker game, all in a row. And so he's and there's more of that in the book, but these sort of games and what went on and stuff. So, but he definitely was a big part of the early history of the NFL.
Yeah, and the first and the last of those games you talked about had quite a bit of controversy surrounding them too, where the team on the losing end wasn't so happy about a few things in it. But again, you cover those some in the book, and that's an interesting stories all to themselves. But he ended up only had a short NFL career due to some circumstances that he had another career move. And maybe if you could speak about that just a bit.
Sure. He actually did play 8 years, or the first 8 years of his career. So, which is actually a decent sized career at the time. But in 1937, he was still playing really well in the NFL, but he had picked up professional wrestling a couple years earlier. And, although he had not known quite much about wrestling, but had a name, like I said, had the physicality, he's a big guy that fit to wrestling. And he didn't necessarily have the best, the greatest personality. He was a quiet guy and stuff. So maybe the flair of it, he had to be taught a little bit more, but he became a very good championship caliber wrestler. He was making more money wrestling than he did with the Bears. Obviously, like I said, this was still the Depression, and House is still trying to manage, a team and keep his team together and try to pay him as much as he could. But he was making more money. And then by 1937, the spring of 37, he's sort of at the top of the list of challengers for the heavyweight, championship in wrestling. And he wins it in the summer of 37. And then if you're actually the world championship wrestler of the world, you have a commitment to a schedule. So it's very unique. And like I said, the book goes into detail of this. I call it the double duty, where the spring and summer, he's wrestling all over the place, 2 or 3 times a week. He's defending his title. He's making, a decent amount of money, more than he would, with the Bears, 2 or 3 times more than he would for the Bears. So he's keeping on the schedule, but his wrestling manager knew he wanted to play football in 37. So in the fall of 37, he does something that I think is just so incredible. He's wrestling sometimes during the week, and then he's playing football on Sundays. He did that early in the season, and then he kind of scaled down, at the end of October and November, and then he just played football because that was the meat of the NFL schedule, and House wanted him to focus on football. But he's doing this double duty. And like I said, there were some times where he would wrestle, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and travel back to Chicago on Saturday, and they play on Sunday, and then be back out on the road wrestling, and so it's just a tremendous athletic event to be able to do both. And then unfortunately, like I said, after the 37 season, he decides, like, if House can't meet his salary demands, which wasn't very much. I think he was making he's back up to $5,000 a year, and he just wanted 6,000 or 7,000. And House wanted to stay at, and he just said, "Well, I'm going to go wrestle." And then he ended up his first retirement. He did come back in 1943 when the war was going on, but he had missed 6 years, and he just played tackle. He had some injuries, but he did help the Bears win a title in 43 during the war. But so those first 8 years, and then that was his 9th year in 1943. But like I said, that 37 season, just a tremendous achievement.
Those are some pretty demanding jobs when you're moonlighting as a football player, and especially the rough and tumble era that he played in. And you're also doing some pro wrestling, which pretty physically grueling too. And you're doing those multiple evenings a week. And wow, that's a pretty tremendous athlete. And did he suffer any injuries during that earlier time? I know you said in 43 when he came back.
Yeah, no, I mean he had I think in 35 he had a back injury that kept him out a lot. Like he had obviously, when you're playing football and you're playing wrestling, you're going to come across things, and it did affect him a little bit later with some arthritis and some joint injuries, later in his life. But I think it was more, like I said, just wear and tear. You're a professional athlete. You're doing football and you're doing wrestling. You're going to have some bumps and bruises along the way.
That's amazing to have the fortitude to be able to do that. I just can't imagine that. That's pretty tremendous. Well, Chris, we appreciate you coming on here and talking about Bronko. And maybe if you could, again, maybe if you want to share some of your social media, and again, let us know where folks can get the book and the title of the book again.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's Bronko, the legendary story of the NFL's greatest two-way fullback. You can get it on Amazon, Barzo's. Like I said, our Rowan and Littlefield is the publisher, so you can go on Rowan.com and pick it up there too. And there's like reviews and features on the publisher's website. So if you want to check out a little bit more about the book, it's there. So like I said, it's entertaining story of a guy, like I said, it's got a big personality and had a tremendous athletic career.
Yeah, folks, it is a fantastic book. Make sure you get a copy of it. And did you want to share your social media as well?
Yeah, it's CD Willis 83 is on Twitter. So there's more stuff on Bronko, that post and a lot about early NFL history too. So, well,
Chris Willis, we appreciate you and appreciate everything you're doing and during your day job too, as well as what you're doing here with these fantastic books. And we're hoping you're going to write some more about this great era, because you have some great ones out so far. So folks, make sure you go to Amazon and just look up Chris Willis's name, and you'll see the big rundown of all these great historical football books.
Oh, no, I appreciate it, Darren. It's always nice to be on the show and talk a little football history.
Thanks, Chris. That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our broadcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
It was just another ordinary day in the offices of the Pittsburgh Guardian newspaper circa 1924. But for Marla Delft, assistant editor, everything was about to change. For she was about to discover the awesome attractiveness of Row 1 brand retro sports paraphernalia items thanks to Orville Mulligan, sports writer.
And there it is.
Wow, Orville, that's really the bee's knees.
Isn't it just? A poster-sized replica of the actual 1909 World Series program cover.
I can see that. But where did you get it? And where'd you get it framed?
I ordered it from the Row 1 website, where over 6,000 items of sports memorabilia from the 1880s to the 1990s are available for reproduction in multiple sizes and in several different materials, with over a dozen styles of frame to choose from for prints like this.
Well, I'm sure Mr. Delft would love to put up more of these in the office. But I'm equally as sure they're beyond this newspaper's budget.
Not at all, my dear Marla. See for yourself. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com/row1.
sportshistorynetwork.com/row1. Oh my, these are good prices. Oh, and look at this stuff. Oklahoma-Nebraska football, college basketball art, Michael Jordan items.
And so it
retro
was that
sports
Marla Delft
advertisement
discovered the
placards.
splendiferous magic of Row 1 sports memorabilia, arts, and prints. You can too by visiting sportshistorynetwork.com/row1. That's ROW1 today for access to the full Row 1 catalog of gallery prints and gifts like t-shirts, long-sleeve shirts, telephone cases, coffee mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Act today for 15% discount off all prints with coupon code SHN15 and 20% off all other items with coupon code SHN20 at checkout. And keep your dial locked to the Sports History Network for the exciting chronicles of the 1920 sports world in Orville Mulligan, Sports Writer. Coming soon.